The joy of becoming a parent is unlike anything else. For my husband, Ethan, and me, that joy came through adoption. We had tried for years, endured the heartbreak of IVF failures, and finally, 5 years ago, our son, Leo, came home. He was 2 months old, a perfect little bundle of hope and new beginnings. Leo's adoption was the centerpiece of our life. It was closed, meaning we had no contact with the biological parents, a decision we made to give Leo a clean slate. Ethan was always fiercely protective of the process, insisting we adhere strictly to the agency's rules. He was the perfect, devoted father, throwing himself into every milestone and every tiny victory. This story begins on Leo's 5th gotcha day, the anniversary of the day he came home. We had a party full of balloons, cake, and the kind of pure, unfiltered family happiness I had always dreamed of. That evening, after Leo was asleep, Ethan and I were in the living room, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a life well built. Ethan was scrolling through adoption photos on his phone, a soft smile on his face. "He's the best thing that ever happened to us, Lauren," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't imagine life without him." "Me neither, honey. He's perfect," I agreed. "And you are the most incredible father." The moment was perfect. Then the doorbell rang. It was late, after 10 p.m. Ethan frowned. Who on earth could that be? "I'm not expecting anything." He went to the door. I stayed in the living room, hearing the murmur of voices. Ethan's voice was low, agitated, and quickly cut off. He came back into the room holding a thick, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't a package. It looked like an official letter. "Who was it?" I asked. "Just a courier. Wrong address, apparently," Ethan said dismissively. He placed the envelope on the mantelpiece, slightly behind a large photo of Leo. "Late-night mix-up. I'll deal with it tomorrow." His answer was too quick, too casual, and his hands were shaking slightly. I looked at the envelope he had tried to hide. It wasn't addressed to us, but the typeface was stark and official. More importantly, I caught a glimpse of the return address. Legal Office of Anna Jensen, Family Law. Family Law. A courier delivery late at night. And Ethan's visceral reaction. This was no mix-up. I let it go for the night, but the seed of suspicion, once planted, takes deep root. The next morning, Ethan was the first one up. He took the envelope with him to his home office, which he immediately locked. He spent the entire morning in there, something he rarely did on a Wednesday. My curiosity soon turned into anxiety. I had to know what was in that letter. This was about family law. This was about our family. When Ethan finally left the house for an emergency client meeting, I went straight to his office. The door was locked, but I knew the drill. We shared a key to the office for emergencies. I opened the door and walked in. The room was pristine, except for one thing: a large, crumpled piece of cream-colored paper lying in the waste bin, hastily torn into 4 pieces. The envelope was nowhere to be seen. I carefully retrieved the pieces from the bin, my hands shaking. I laid them on the desk and pieced them together. The paper was heavy stock, the same as the envelope. It was a letter from the lawyer's office. I read the first few lines, and the world fractured, just as it had for Ava in the last story. The letter was a legal demand. It wasn't addressed to Ethan, but to the adoption agency, with Ethan and me copied. "Re the minor child, Leo Sterling, date of birth 2020/20/4440. This firm is initiating proceedings to challenge the validity of the adoption of the above-named child by Ethan and Lauren Sterling. Our client, the biological mother, Mary Vance, asserts that the consent given 5 years ago was obtained under duress and coercion. Furthermore, our client asserts that the adoption was based on fraudulent representation of the child's true identity, specifically the concealment of the biological father's identity and connection to the adoptive family. I stopped breathing. Coercion, fraud, and the biological mother, Mary Vance, was challenging the closed adoption. But the last phrase was the one that detonated the entire foundation of my life. Concealment of the biological father's identity and connection to the adoptive family. Ethan was fiercely protective of the closed adoption. He always insisted that the biological father was out of the picture. I stared at the name Mary Vance. I had never heard it. But the name, the fraud claim, and the fact that Ethan had tried to hide this letter all pointed to one terrible, inescapable conclusion. Ethan knew Mary Vance and the connection to the adoptive family. I looked at the photo of Leo on the desk. Leo had my nose, but the rest of his features, the striking jawline, the intense green eyes, were an exact uncanny replica of my husband. I had always dismissed the resemblance as one of those strange adoptive coincidences. But what if it wasn't a coincidence? What if the closed adoption wasn't closed at all? What if Leo's biological father was Ethan? The terrifying possibility slammed into me. My son wasn't just adopted. He was the result of a secret affair my husband had 5 years ago, and he had orchestrated the entire adoption to bring his love child into our family under a veil of perfect secrecy. The crumpled letter piece was the only physical evidence I had, but the realization, the possibility that Leo was Ethan's biological son, was enough to turn my world upside down. My perfect family life was built on a foundation of lies, orchestrated by the man who swore he loved me. I quickly pieced together the fragments of the letter, took photos of them, and then carefully put the torn pieces back in the trash can, exactly as I had found them. I locked the office door, my hands trembling. My next step was to find out who Mary Vance was and why Ethan was so panicked about the concealment of the biological father's identity. I started with Mary Vance's name. I searched her name alongside Ethan's company, Ethan's college, and our old city. Nothing. It seemed the paper trail was intentionally cold. Then I had a chilling thought. Ethan was a brilliant civil engineer. He was meticulous. If he orchestrated an adoption to conceal his paternity, he would have left no digital trace of Mary Vance, but he would have records of the affair itself. I remembered a period 5 years ago when Ethan was working on a massive, secretive project 3 states away. He was gone for months, only returning on weekends. He always attributed his intense focus during that time to the high-stakes contract. I decided to check his bank statements from that time. I knew his banking passwords, a privilege I hadn't used in years. I logged into his primary personal account. I pulled up the statements from the 9 months leading up to Leo's adoption. There were no suspicious transfers, no massive spending spikes. Ethan was financially meticulous, but I found something else. During the 5 months he was supposedly working on that remote project, there were frequent large cash withdrawals labeled Travel Entertainment Project Site. These were often followed by equally large monthly deposits into his account from a completely separate small credit union, an account I didn't recognize. The account name was generic, E. Sterling Escrow. I spent hours tracking down the credit union. I called, pretending to be a tax agent, citing an audit of the E. Sterling escrow account. The bank confirmed the account was closed 2 years ago, but the representative was able to give me a single, crucial piece of information: the name of the secondary signatory on the account. The secondary signatory was Mary Vance. The E. Sterling escrow account, open only during the time Mary Vance was pregnant and immediately after Leo's birth, was a financial bridge between my husband and the woman claiming he coerced her into the adoption. But the real devastating confirmation was yet to come. I needed to see the actual adoption file. Ethan kept our official adoption file in a fireproof safe in the master bedroom closet. He always insisted that I handle the sentimental documents, but he handled the legal papers. He had never shown me the official documents from the agency, claiming they were too sensitive and contained information about the birth parents we agreed to stay away from. I knew the safe combination, our anniversary date. I opened it. The safe was full of tax returns, deeds, and a single thick manila envelope labeled Leo Sterling Closed Adoption File. I pulled it out, my hands slick with sweat. I opened the file. Inside, I found the official court documents, the birth certificate, and the signed surrender papers. I went straight to the biological parents section. Biological mother, Mary Elise Vance. Address. Same address as the escrow account bank branch. Biological father. Intentionally left blank on the court documents. But there was a small stapled rider attached to the bottom of the surrender document. It was a secondary confidential agreement between the birth mother and the adoption agency, with a clause that had been heavily redacted with black marker. I held the paper up to the light of the window. The black marker was thick, but I could make out a faint impression underneath. I rubbed the back of the paper with a pencil, using a rudimentary tracing technique. The hidden text underneath the redaction was a simple handwritten statement, witnessed by a notary. I, Mary Elise Vance, acknowledge receipt redacted $100,000 payment from the adoptive father, Ethan Sterling, as final compensation for the emotional and physical hardship caused by this adoption. I further acknowledge that Ethan Sterling is the biological father of the child, and that this information is to be permanently sealed to protect his marital relationship. The air left my lungs. $100,000 blackmail paternity confirmed. And the whole thing, the entire perfect love story of our adoption, was a carefully orchestrated fraud designed to protect his marital relationship, which he had already destroyed with his affair. Leo wasn't just adopted, he was a human secret, bought and paid for by my husband. Ethan had a long-distance affair, got Mary Vance pregnant, and then used a massive cash payment in a closed adoption agency to bring his son home and pass him off as a stranger's child, all while I grieved the failure of my own body to conceive. I carefully replaced the document in the safe, closed and locked it. The gentle click was the sound of my life ending. I was no longer facing a simple affair. I was facing years of calculated criminal deception. I had to know if the lawyer's letter I found in the trash, the legal challenge, was real or just another piece of Ethan's paranoia. I had to talk to the one person who had dared to break Ethan's iron wall of lies, Mary Vance. The knowledge that Ethan had fathered Leo during an affair and then paid $100,000 to his mistress to adopt his own son was a shockwave that left me numb. The adoption was not a gift of fate. It was the chilling criminal conclusion of his infidelity. The legal letter from the family law office was my only path forward. It proved Mary Vance, the biological mother, was real, alive, and ready to fight. I needed to meet her, not to threaten her, but to understand the depth of Ethan's coercion. I called the lawyer's office, not identifying myself as Ethan's wife, but as a concerned party associated with the adoption agency. The lawyer, cautious, refused to give me Mary's number but agreed to pass on a message. I have critical, life-altering information regarding the Leo Sterling adoption that Mary needs to hear. Tell her I can prove the fraud. Mary Vance called me back within an hour. Her number was blocked, and her voice was thin, reedy, and full of exhaustion. "Who is this?" she demanded. "The lawyer said you have information." "My name is Lauren, and I know you are the birth mother of Leo Sterling, and I know Ethan Sterling is his biological father," I stated, dropping the bombs one after the other. There was a long, shaky silence. Then a raw, bitter sound. "You're the wife. He finally told you." "No, Ethan didn't tell me. I found the proof. I found the documents where he paid you $100,000 to sign away his son. I found the adoption file." "He told me you were sterile," Mary whispered, the memory of her own pain evident in her voice. "He told me he had to do it this way, that it was the only way you could be a mother, and that you would love Leo. He promised me he would always be in Leo's life, even if I couldn't. I loved Ethan, but he used me. He used my desperation and my shame to take my baby." We arranged to meet immediately at a neutral, dimly lit coffee shop 30 miles away. I needed to see her face, to ensure she wasn't another piece of Ethan's continuing deception. Mary Vance was nothing like the woman I'd imagined. She wasn't a femme fatale or a greedy opportunist. She was a quiet, damaged woman who looked exactly her age but carried the weariness of a lifetime. "Why are you challenging the adoption now, Mary?" I asked, pushing a cup of coffee towards her. "You took the money 5 years ago." She shook her head, tears welling up. "I regretted it the moment he left, but I was alone, disgraced, and he was so intimidating. He told me if I ever talked, he would ruin my life. He said he had lawyers who would paint me as an unfit, greedy mother who tried to blackmail a respectable family. He used the $100,000 to buy my silence, but he used his power to buy my soul." She paused, taking a shuddering breath. "I only filed the challenge because Leo started showing up at places near my work. Small things. A little boy with those distinctive green eyes. I saw him at a park near my home. I thought Ethan was stalking me, trying to remind me that he still had my son." "Leo was near your work?" I frowned. "Ethan would never bring Leo to a remote area. Leo is in school." "No, not your house. He showed up at places near my house, about 30 miles from here. Then 2 weeks ago, I saw him walking into the new community center near my apartment. He was with a woman who wasn't you, a young, pretty nanny." The revelation was jarring. Ethan was constantly traveling for his work, and when he was home, he was intensely focused on Leo. "We didn't have a nanny. We couldn't afford one." "We don't have a nanny, Mary." "I'm a stay-at-home mother," I said, confused. "Well, he certainly does." "I saw them together multiple times. She was taking Leo to places far from your home." Mary reached into her purse and pulled out a blurry photo taken on a phone. It showed Leo walking hand in hand with a young woman, laughing. And in the background, out of focus but unmistakable, was a large modern house with manicured lawns, a house I had never seen. "That's not our house, Mary, and that's not me." "I know," Mary whispered, "but I think it might be the house Ethan rents for his work trips. The house where the other part of his life is kept a secret." The truth hammered into me. Ethan's betrayal wasn't confined to a 5-year-old affair and a fraudulent adoption. He was maintaining a second, completely secret life, possibly with a new mistress and a second stolen home. The urgent client meeting and the out-of-town project weren't just lies to meet Mary Vance. They were lies to maintain a double life. I looked at Mary, seeing her not as a threat, but as an unlikely, desperate ally. "Mary, I need your help. Ethan must pay for this, for Leo, and for what he did to us both. If you give me the evidence of his coercion, I will give you what you deserve, the truth about your son and the chance to be in his life." I drove home, no longer a victim, but a woman armed with a horrifying truth and a new partner in justice. I now had to trace the hidden property in the background of Mary's photo, the second sanctuary my husband had created, funded by my ignorance. Mary Vance's grainy photograph, Leo with an unknown nanny in front of a strange modern house, was the key to unlocking Ethan's entire double life. I didn't care about a new mistress. I cared that he was taking my son, his biological son, to a secret location, further entrenching the lie of our stable family unit. I immediately hired a private investigator, PI, using the last of my emergency savings. I gave him the photo and the location of the community center Mary had mentioned. It took the PI less than 12 hours to trace the house. The house was not a rental. It was a property purchased 3 years ago, registered under a limited liability company, LLC, I had never heard of, G&E Property Management. The PI quickly pulled the company's registration. The primary owner was listed as Giselle Dubois. The secondary owner, Ethan Sterling. Giselle Dubois, the new mistress, the second life, the G in the LLC, while the E was Ethan. I immediately drove to the address. The house was exactly as pictured, sleek, expensive, and utterly impersonal. I waited a safe distance away until I saw movement. It was Giselle. She was leaving, impeccably dressed, carrying a briefcase, heading toward a luxury sedan. She was beautiful, successful, and clearly unaware of the web of lies she was caught in. I approached her just as she was opening her car door. "Giselle Dubois?" I asked, my voice calm. She turned, annoyed by the interruption. "Yes, can I help you?" "My name is Lauren Sterling. I am Ethan Sterling's wife, and I am here to talk to you about our son, Leo." The color drained from her face. Her composure evaporated. "Wife? Leo? I don't know what you're talking about. Ethan doesn't have a wife. He told me he was divorced years ago." "He told you a lot of things, Giselle. He told me he was working on an intense, out-of-town project for 3 years. He told me the same project was funding this house. The truth is, he was maintaining a double life with you, funded by his engineering income. This is the truth. Leo is Ethan's biological son, adopted under fraudulent circumstances 5 years ago, and I believe you have been employing a nanny to take him here during Ethan's work trips." Giselle was shaking. "No, that's impossible. Ethan told me Leo was his nephew, the son of his deceased brother, and that he was helping the family out by looking after him and employing the nanny. He said you were a jealous, unstable ex who was trying to fight for custody of a child that wasn't even yours." The audacity of his lies was breathtaking. He had painted me as the villain, the jealous, childless ex, while passing off his own son as his nephew to his new lover. He used Leo as an emotional tool in both his lives. "Show me the nanny," I demanded. Giselle fumbled with her phone and pulled up a picture of the young woman Mary had seen. "This is Clara. She's the nanny. Ethan pays her a substantial amount to bring Leo here after school and on weekends when he's visiting his nephew. He told me he wanted Leo to experience a stable male presence." I realized the sinister implication. Ethan was spending quality, paternal time with his biological son without the pretense of our marital home, fully integrating Leo into his second life with Giselle, while telling me he was on a conference call in his locked office. "Giselle, he also told you he was the sole owner of the LLC, didn't he? That you were just his business partner." "Yes, G&E Property Management. I put up the initial investment. Ethan was supposed to manage the portfolio, which is why he put his name on the LLC. I pulled out the PI's paperwork. The PI confirms you are the primary owner. Ethan is the secondary. The house is legally yours. And I believe he plans to leave me and our home and transition fully into this life, using the fabricated story of his unstable ex-wife to get custody of Leo, his biological son. The confluence of the legal, emotional, and financial fraud was overwhelming. Ethan had meticulously planned his escape route, creating a financial base with Giselle and an emotional one with Leo. Giselle looked at the documents, her eyes darting between her name and the chilling legal facts. She saw not a devoted partner, but a liar who used his own son as a decoy. "I need to leave," Giselle said, scrambling into her car. "I need to call my lawyer." I had no idea he was still married, or that the boy was his own son. She sped away, leaving me standing alone, the devastating truth finally revealed. My husband had orchestrated a fraudulent adoption, paid off his mistress, and then used his own son as bait for a new life built on theft and lies. I called Mary Vance. "Mary, I have the evidence, the full story. Ethan is not ready for the confrontation. We need to move on the legal challenge now. We need to secure Leo before he integrates him completely into his second, secret life." I drove home, no longer the grieving wife, but the mother who had to fight a criminal for the right to raise the child she loved, regardless of his paternity. I was ready to face Ethan, armed with the evidence of his affair, his forgery, and his 2 fraudulent homes. I got home and went straight to the locked safe. I retrieved the adoption file and the notarized rider detailing the $100,000 payment. I was no longer afraid of the evidence. I needed it. Ethan arrived home an hour later, looking tired but carrying the smug satisfaction of a man whose complex lie was still intact. He kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day, and headed straight to his locked office. I waited until he emerged, ready to settle down for the evening. Leo was already asleep. "Ethan," I said, my voice calm, "I think we need to talk about the courier delivery from the other night, the one from the family law attorney." He froze, his hand already reaching for the TV remote. "I told you, Lauren. Wrong address. It was just a mix-up." "No mix-up, Ethan." I found the letter in the bin, and I found the adoption file in the safe, and I found the confidential rider you tried to hide. I placed the shredded letter, the adoption file, and the financial rider on the coffee table. He stared at the documents, his face draining of color, the perfect father facade melting into naked panic. "Lauren, please. I can explain. It was years ago. She was trying to blackmail me. I paid her to make it go away for us, for Leo. You didn't do it for us, Ethan. You did it to protect your image. You paid Mary Vance $100,000 to conceal the fact that you are Leo's biological father. You orchestrated the entire adoption to pass off your love child as a foundling, all while I was grieving my inability to conceive. That is cruelty. He dropped onto the sofa, completely defeated. Yes, it's true. It was a mistake, a momentary lapse when I was away. But I love him, and I love you. I brought him to you because I knew you'd be a good mother. I gave you the son you always wanted. You didn't give me a son, Ethan. You used me to hide the evidence of your affair. But the lies didn't stop there. I slid the final pieces of evidence across the table. The LLC documents listing Giselle Dubois as the primary owner of the second house, the photo of Leo with the nanny outside that house, and the PY's detailed report of his weekend visits there. Giselle Dubois, G&E Property Management, the house you take Leo to when you are supposedly working on your out-of-town project. You didn't stop with Mary Vance. You established a secret second life and a second home, and you used Leo, your biological son, as the emotional bridge to your new family unit. His head snapped up, the betrayal of his second lie making him furious. That's not fair. Giselle is my business partner. I was preparing a safe transition for Leo. Giselle loves him. I wanted him to be comfortable with her before I told you I wanted a divorce. You were going to divorce me, use the story of the unstable, jealous wife to get full custody of Leo, and move him permanently into the second house with your new mistress, all while I fought for the rights to a child I believed was a stranger's. He nodded, shame and defiance warring in his eyes. I just wanted to do what was best for my son. He needs a stable, happy environment, not a marriage built on disappointment. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang, hard and persistent, just like the night the lawyer's letter arrived. Ethan flinched. Who is that? It's the consequence of your actions, Ethan, I said, walking to the door. I knew exactly who it was. I opened the door. Standing there was Mary Vance, flanked by her lawyer, Anna Jensen, and 2 police officers. Mrs. Sterling, Anna Jensen said firmly, we are here to serve Ethan Sterling. Due to new evidence, we have filed an immediate ex parte motion for the custody of the minor child, Leo Sterling, citing fraud, coercion, and concealment of paternity in the original adoption proceedings. Ethan rushed to the door, realizing the devastating truth. Mary, you wouldn't. We had a deal. Mary Vance looked at him, her eyes finally clear of fear. The deal was based on a lie, Ethan. The deal was based on you being a respectable father who would leave me alone. You broke that deal when you used my son to create your second life. The police officers stepped past the women and placed Ethan under a citizen's arrest, citing the serious financial fraud and coercion involved in the $100,000 payment and the fraudulent representation to the adoption agency. The arrest was based on the evidence Mary and I had meticulously collected. As they led Ethan away, the entire facade of his life collapsed. He looked at me, no longer with hatred, but with a plea. Lauren, please don't let them take Leo. He's my son. He's our son, Ethan, I corrected, my voice ringing with finality. And you lost the right to claim him when you made him the center of your criminal lie. The aftermath was painful but ultimately liberating. The legal battle with Mary Vance was intense. I worked with Mary, acknowledging her parental rights and using the evidence of Ethan's fraud to ensure the court focused solely on Leo's best interest. The judge, appalled by Ethan's calculated deceit, invalidated the original adoption, citing coercion and fraud. However, the judge also recognized the deep bond between Leo and me. The court ruled that Leo's best interest was to remain with me, the only mother he had ever known, while granting Mary Vance supervised visitation and shared legal custody. I was allowed to formally adopt Leo again, this time as a single parent, with Mary's full consent. Ethan was stripped of all parental rights due to his criminal deception. The $100,000 he paid Mary was deemed restitution for coercion. His two homes, the marital home and the secret house with Giselle, were liquidated, the assets divided, and he was left with nothing but a life ruined by his own lies. The boy I adopted was not just my son, he was the child of my husband's betrayal. But in the end, that betrayal led me to the one person who deserved justice, and together we created the true, honest family unit Leo deserved. The secret was out. The adopted son was the husband's loved child, and the shocking truth was the only thing that could set us all free.